So who do you think would win out of Nicolas Cage and Jack Black?
Yeah, I think Nicolas Cage would probably eviscerate Jack Black with his own
Crazy
eye powers. Yeah, with his snake eyes. I mean, hey. Sorry guys. We
Welcome back.
Really got to stop doing that. Welcome back to another episode of Joe and Sophie Tell a Tale. Today's topic is Sherlock Holmes. So a topic that's very close to both of our hearts. Both big fans of the books, the stories, the Sherlock show.
I've watched every
incarnation of Sherlock Holmes. But before we get onto that, we should probably do the intro.
Oh yeah.
You ready, people? Hit it, Derek. Joe and Sophie tell a tale. We'll try our best, but we'll probably fail. So come with us, 'cause we're about to set sail as Joe and Sophie tell a tale. Okay, well, that was it. I think that was the best one so far, to be honest.
Maybe.
Okay, so Sherlock, a very exciting topic. Now, as we know, Sherlock was written, a character created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, a British writer who I think was possibly actually Irish.
I think he's dead now.
I think he's dead. Yeah, I think. Yeah. He died of a broken heart.
Oh.
No, he didn't. He died because he fell off the Reichenbach Falls with his arch enemy Houdini. No, I don't know. So yeah, we're just gonna have a little bit of a informal chat about Sherlock Holmes and everything.
The old man himself.
The old man himself, Sherlock Holmes. I was researching this episode and I thought, what can I talk about that hasn't really been talked that much about? And I came across something that I found pretty interesting to do with Sherlock. This competition that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle ran in the Strand magazine. So the Strand magazine, as you know, as I'm sure a lot of people know, was the original publication where Arthur Conan Doyle's stories about Sherlock Holmes first appeared. And also his Sherlock Holmes novels would appear in kind of serialized form in the pages of that esteemed publication. So in the Strand, one day, Arthur Conan Doyle decided to run a competition. And he said basically that people would write in to the magazine and say what they thought were the 12 best Sherlock Holmes stories. I think that's pretty ballsy of an author to do. And I can't imagine any writer doing that today. I
love ACD.
I mean, he's
that's
great.
Pretentious.
No, I think it's cool. I think he's just everybody come up with your 12 favorite Sherlock Holmes stories, and I shall come up with the 12 that I think are the best, in my own personal opinion, as the person who wrote them.
So I'm correct.
I am right. And whoever gets it, and basically the idea was whoever got the list closest to his list, so whoever could kind of guess which ones he thought were the best of his own stories that he wrote, would win £100 plus a copy of his latest book signed, I think.
$100 back then, not bad.
£100.
Hell yeah.
Which, I don't know, no idea about inflation rates or anything.
That was decent.
That would have been pretty good back then. I think he was probably paid £10 per story or something. So
Richmond.
yeah. So yeah, he started that competition, which I thought was pretty cool. And I've actually got the list here that I wanted to read a little bit out from. I've saved it on this little page somewhere. Okay.
That's not a book. He just blew on his iPad screen.
I'm blowing the cobwebs away. Yeah. Okay, so this competition was released in March of 1927. So that's when he started it. Basically, he writes, that he went into the competition thinking that it would be really easy to pick out 12 stories, but then he realised it would be a lot harder than he at first thought because obviously all of his stories were so great.
I can't even tell which one is the best.
Yeah, he's like, in practice I found that I had engaged myself in a serious task. In the first place, I had to read the stories myself with some care. So what he did though was, because when this competition went to air, or went to print, it was shortly before the publication of his last collection of Sherlock Holmes stories, which was called the Case Book of Sherlock Holmes. So this was like a collection of 12 stories or whatever. So he eliminated all of those short stories from the competition. But then when he actually came out and finally revealed which ones were his 12 favourite, the ones for the list, he also kind of did the favour of saying which ones he would have included from the Casebook of Sherlock Holmes, which weren't included. So what he said was, had they been available, I should have put 2 of them in my team, namely the lion's mane and the illustrious client. The first of these is hampered, is being told by Holmes himself, a method which I employed only twice, as it certainly cramps the narrative. On the other hand, the actual plot is among the very best of the whole series.
The lion's mane.
The lion's mane.
That's about the jellyfish, isn't it?
Is it?
Yeah, the lion's mane is actually a jellyfish. It's like got the longest tentacle. What do jellyfish have? Tentacle-y thingies?
Yeah.
The longest one of them,
noodles.
and it was, at the time, the biggest animal in the ocean. And its like sting like could kill a man instantly. And I think a dude got killed by it, and someone runs up to him and he's like, "It was the lion's mane." That's how I imagine it.
So everyone thinks it's actually a lion.
Everyone's like, "Oh, what? Oh, is there a guy called that, or is it
or was
it
an actual
now?"
lion, or like?
It's actually a jellyfish.
It's actually a jellyfish. Oh well, thanks for the spoiler, because I was looking forward to reading that one.
I'm pretty sure that's what. But don't quote me entirely.
I'm pretty sure that was because I was watching some of the Sherlock show, the Benedict Cumberbatch one.
Yeah.
And they have a brief reference to something about a jellyfish as they're passing by. You know how they always just randomly reference other cases that they've done that they never show on screen. So at one point, I'm pretty sure they're like running down the stairs, and Watson says something like, "Oh, this was just like the jellyfish again," or something like that. Like something like that.
I'll
I can't
have to
remember.
go back and see.
Yeah. It might have even been because I just rewatched the one that's like the Victorian era Christmas special, so it might have been that one, which has that episode has a lot of sort of classic references to the original Holmes canon. Yeah. Which jumping away from the list for a second, I realised that in that episode of Sherlock, where it's like based in the Victorian era, that whole sort of fantasy of Sherlock and Watson existing in the 19th century is all inside Sherlock's mind. So that's kind of a bit of a spoiler at the end of that episode, is that you find out it's all just him kind of trying to work his way through like a 100-year-old case, and he's kind of put himself in that situation. But in that episode, they also refer to Watson's stories, like The Hound of the Baskervilles and stuff like that. Yeah. So that kind of implies that all of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's stories, like all of the canon Sherlock Holmes stories, actually exist inside the mind of Benedict Cumberbatch as Sherlock.
Just Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah, inside of just Benedict Cumberbatch. And that's why if you actually read like the stories of Sherlock Holmes, there's random references to the Reichenbach Falls and Moriarty and stuff, and that's actually the modern day Sherlock. That's actually from his mind. Yeah, and that's why there's little scattered references to like characters and stuff from the show, because that's his real life, and everything in the books and the stories is actually the imagined stuff that he created in his mind palace, in his drug-fueled
awesome.
mind palace.
Head canon accepted. I can get down with that.
Thank you.
I can get down and boogie with it.
So the other one that he said he would have included, this is back to Arthur Conan Doyle, the other story from the casebook of Sherlock Holmes that he would have included was The Illustrious Client, which he says is not remarkable for plot, but it has a certain dramatic quality and moves adequately in lofty circles, so I should also have found a place for it.
And he's so fabulous.
He's so
I wish I talked like that.
I love Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
If I went to the street like, oh, by the way, this car park seemed quite... I can't even think of a fancy word because I just don't speak like that.
Speckled.
Speckled? With what?
I don't know.
Speckled with thy gum of the children of youths today.
So this was his complete list of the 12 Sherlock Holmes stories that he thought were the best.
Definitive list.
Yeah, so anyone who's at home listening can play along at home and sort of see if their list
on there?
Went along in the same way. And then if you got the list exactly how Conan Doyle himself got it, then you could have won £100 back then.
My favourite was the Study in Scarlet.
Study in Scarlet.
That's because it was the first one I read.
That's right, and it's the first one he wrote as well.
Yeah.
But that is a Sherlock Holmes novel, and they're not included. This is just the short stories. So yeah. So the list is therefore as follows. He says, number 1, the Speckled Band. Number 2, the Red-Headed League. Number 3, the Dancing Men. Number 4, the Final Problem. Number 5, a Scandal in Bohemia. Number 6, the Empty House. Number 7, the 5 Orange Pips. Number 8, the Second Stain. Number 9, the Devil's Food. 10, the Priory School. 11, the Musgrave Ritual. And 12, the Reigate Squires.
Wow.
And
some names there. Some names.
He has the best names for and all of his stories are just, you can tell he's just having so much fun writing them, and that's kind of what I love about rereading Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes stories is you can tell he was writing for a mass audience, and you can tell that he was having tons of fun writing them, and you could tell that people reading them were having just as much fun reading them, and
Except didn't he kill Sherlock because he was bored and he hated the character?
Yeah, apparently. I don't know if he hated the character. I think he was just sick of the character kind of taking over his life. So he kind of wanted to be done with the whole character. So
well,
he was
he's
just like,
dead now.
yeah, he was like, he's dead. So
And everyone
basically,
was like, oh, and he's like, all right,
yeah,
he's back.
That's right, he's back. But from what I understand, though, is he never actually explained how Sherlock survived. Because basically, in the story, The Final Problem, that was the one that he wrote. That was like, okay, I want to kill off Sherlock, so I'll make it, really cool sort of ending where Sherlock and his arch nemesis Moriarty both, these premium intellects, like one can never beat the other. So basically, they both plummet to their deaths together at the Reichenbach Falls.
Yeah, classic.
Yep, classic. In part of the Holmes mythology. Basically, a couple of years later, or whenever it was, he came back and he said, "Okay, Sherlock's back," but then sort of never explained how he was alive
I'd
again.
be so pissed if I was back then. I'm reading it. I'll be like, what?
Yeah, and he kind of sort of never mentions Moriarty again, I don't think. So it's kind of like Moriarty
So-
died, but somehow
okay.
Sherlock survived. Which I think is carried through into the Cumberbatch show, because when, they deal with that part of the mythology, which is, Moriarty shooting himself in the head, and then Sherlock...
Spoilers, by the way.
Sherlock being forced to jump off the roof of
Yeah.
St. Bart's Hospital. He obviously survives, because there's another couple of seasons after that, and a Christmas special. But they never fully explain how he does it, how he survives.
Yeah, they do.
No, they don't.
Yeah, he does.
No, they...
I'll bet you $100 billion.
I bet you £100 and a signed copy of Sir
Yeah.
Arthur Conan Doyle's memoirs. No, they don't, because the first episode after that starts with an explanation of, how it all happened.
Which is wrong.
Which is wrong, because it turns out that's just Anderson. That's just the
Anderson, like the guy you hate.
yeah, like
his
the Sherlock
version.
Holmes fan club. That's just
Yeah.
them spitballing, trying to come up with a fancy way that he could have survived. Then the next one that you see
Is another fake one.
Is another fake
Yes.
one. Yes, it's Sherlock describing to Anderson how he did it, but then Anderson sort of loses his mind, because he's just like, he starts seeing all these inconsistencies in the story, and he's just like, wait a minute, how could this have happened? How could this have happened? And then he starts tearing off all the photos on his wall and just goes crazy and loses his mind. And then they never reveal how it actually happened.
Yeah, the plain one is the one that happens. He just jumps off and he's got all these peeps helping him out. Because Molly knew the whole time.
Molly obviously knew, because you see him go to Molly and talk to her about
Yeah.
it. But that's revealed
But
as
the
being
whole-
fake.
No,
It is.
I'm watching it again because
No,
you're wrong.
because he goes to Watson and he starts. I think Sherlock starts telling Watson, like, "Oh, this is what happened," and no, I think because he's telling Anderson about that whole story about how they got the fake dead body and then they replaced it with Sherlock, and
Yeah,
Sherlock put
that's
that
the
thing
real one.
under his thing. But that's when Anderson is just like, "Wait a minute, how could you have been here? And how could you have done this?" And he starts questioning it all. So that's
I
probably
can't even-
close to the reality.
Man, I
But
can't
then,
even remember.
yeah, it's
I
then
used
it's
to be
revealed
such
that
a fanboy.
there's obviously, like, he's not telling the full story. But then what happens at the end of that episode is that Watson and Sherlock have a bit of a heart-to-heart where, Watson says to him, I wanted you to... I stood at your graveside and I asked you for a favour. I asked you to not be dead. And Sherlock
Yeah.
says, I heard you.
He didn't.
And, yeah, he did. He was there.
Yeah, well, yeah, but he was so far away that he did not hear it.
But he's like, he's like, I heard you.
No.
And it's like, that sums up their relationship, because it's like, obviously it's not supernatural, but like he came back because he knew that Watson needed him. Like, and it doesn't matter how he survived. It doesn't matter how he made it off that roof. It doesn't matter if there was a dead body or a fake dead body or a conspiracy or whatever, or if Mycroft helped him or how Molly helped. All that matters is that Watson needed him and that he asked him not to be dead, and he granted his wish.
2 years later.
Yep. After going undercover in
Yep.
like Slovenia or whatever,
Yeah.
and like toppling
Getting
Moriarty's
tortured
criminal
and-
enterprise. But yeah.
Damn,
so,
that show's good.
yeah, such a good show. In conclusion to this like brief topic that I thought I'd bring up, March 1927 was when Arthur Conan Doyle released that competition, and then he died that very afternoon.
Oh, well,
No, he
damn.
didn't. He didn't.
Oh, okay.
he,
Stop
he died.
tricking me
He
with
died
things.
3 years later,
Three.
but he never wrote another word about Sherlock Holmes after that. That was the
Oh,
first.
wow.
That
Okay.
was the very last thing he ever wrote about him. So in today's terms, that would be like the very last interview on TV
Yeah.
he ever gave about
Aw,
the
sad
character,
face.
but and so he died in 1930. which is he was 71. So, which I think is, quite youngish, but I guess would have been quite oldish
Back
for the
then
period.
was probably, like, pretty evensies.
But I just wonder if he would have eventually been persuaded to write another Sherlock Holmes story after, maybe a few years later or something. Maybe he would have gone like, oh, I got a good idea for another Sherlock Holmes adventure, or maybe he would have been like, oh, I wonder what Holmes and Watson would be doing now, like, and
Yeah, maybe.
But we'll never know. But yeah.
Someone needs to bring him back from the dead.
What, Arthur Conan Doyle or Sherlock Holmes?
Yeah. He's not real.
Alright, over to you.
My one is I'm going to talk briefly about the difference between Robert Downey Jr.'s Sherlock Holmes, and Benedict Cumberbatch's Sherlock Holmes.
Very interesting. Funny because they were around the same time period.
They were. I think the show came out briefly a bit beforehand.
Yeah.
I think, and then the first film of Robert Downey Jr.'s came out just a bit after. And then obviously the show continued, and then the second film came out.
Yep.
But they are vastly different.
They are indeed.
At first glance, you'd probably think that the Robert Downey Jr. one follows the books more.
Yeah.
Since the Benedict Cumberbatch one, Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss' version, is set in present day. Obviously, there's computers, there's phones, there's good toilet systems.
Yep.
Whereas Robert Downey Jr.'s one's set in the actual time period.
Yeah,
when
that's right.
Sherlock's books was,
it's like
written.
Superficially, it's like it seems to be close to the Holmes
at first glance,
expectation.
you'd think that's what it is. They're all wearing button-up suits and stuff.
Yep,
That's how it goes. However, since Robert Downey Jr.'s version is so like Hollywoodized, I think is what you.
I think that's the correct term. Yeah,
that's in the dictionary. There's just so much action. There's always these like little twists and stuff. The dynamic between Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law, though, which is who plays Watson, is so good. But I don't know how I compare that to Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman's Sherlock and Watson, because they're so good as well.
Yeah,
but
there's something about like in
two men.
There's something about two men who love each other. There's something about Martin Freeman's Watson in the Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat show.
Yeah.
Martin Freeman just sells that show for me. He's just like Benedict Cumberbatch is amazing.
My favourite was Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah, and of course Sherlock Holmes, the role, that's the funner role to play. But that show would be nothing without Martin Freeman as Watson. He's the heart, and he just owns every scene.
You can tell that they're like friends in real life.
Yeah.
And that they play off of each other.
I actually think that in the Guy Ritchie movies, so the Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law, I always felt like Jude Law was a bit too
he's
a bit too
stoic.
annoyed at Robert Downey Jr. all the time. Like he's really angry, and it's just
like he is.
I don't know.
Like the first 10 minutes, he like punches him in the face. Or, like,
and it's like they obviously were trying to go for that kind of like. Yeah, they're bros, but they also like hate each other and get into the occasional fist fight and stuff. Yeah. But I think
I think even though like Jude Law is also obviously Jude Law's British and Robert Downey Jr. is American. Yeah. Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman are both English. Yeah. Obviously, and I think Martin Freeman encompasses that just like British like that. Yeah. English vibe.
That just sort of weary bus driver.
Yeah, like when you hear stand up and you're just like.
Yeah, that's right. And he's not afraid. He doesn't let Sherlock get away with anything. Like, he still will call him out, and he'll still be really angry, and he still frequently punched him in the face.
I think he did, actually.
Like, multiple
more
times.
Than once,
But you can tell there's just so much love, and he just really wants to spend
Even
time
in, like,
with...
the first episode, like, that scene where I think that they ran away from, or they were chasing something, and they run back into 221B Baker Street. And they're just, like, leaning up against a wall, and they're, like, out of breath because of the running. And then, like, they're both just, like, smiling and laughing because they just were like, oh, that was such a weird, fun little thing that we did, which was stupid. And they're just like, ha, ha, ha. And that's, like, I think that was, like, the first episode, and it was just so great. Cause it shows, that he's not just like, oh, I'm the British man who's been forced to come on these adventures with a cool, smart guy. He's like, I like adventure, but also, shut up, Sherlock, you're an idiot. Like,
exactly. It's that perfect, that perfect balance between the two. Between the shut up, Sherlock, and the, like, I love you, Sherlock.
No, I don't. That is a big thing as well. John Locke.
John Locke, yes. Going back to Lost.
Yeah. I never believed in John Locke, but...
No, but, I think they just
have bromance. Definite
bromance. Like, they're just the bros to end all bros.
Oh,
like, they're just
Except
best
maybe
friends.
Turk and JD from Scrubs.
Yeah, true. Yeah, they are like a modern day. Well, they're both in modern day, but I don't know.
But yeah, well, definitely, I think when you actually watch it, the Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss version is definitely more faithful to the books and the Arthur Conan Doyle ones. This because you can tell both writers love Arthur Conan Doyle's work so much, and there are so many just little like notes, little like visual aspects of it, just like Easter eggs and stuff that they mention in the show or visually show that like calls back to the books. That it just feels like a more faithful adaptation.
I think that's the thing for me. The main difference between the Guy Ritchie movies and the Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss iterations is that with the Robert Downey Jr. ones, you have to. It's like a Hollywood movie where you have to. You can just check your intelligence at the door. You know, you can just kind of go.
Explain everything.
It's explosions, it's fight scenes, it's actions. Yeah, there's twists, there's turns, and there's like a crime that you don't know how it was committed.
Half-naked lady.
Yep, sure. But you are just kind of like, yep, you can just watch it and have everything explained to you. Sherlock, the show, you have to pay attention to every single scene, to every single frame. You have to actually actively use your brain to watch it and enjoy it, and it will have you thinking about it after you watch every episode. The Robert Downey Jr. version is just all cerebral, and it's a good bit of fun, but you'll forget about it a couple of hours later. The Benedict Cumberbatch version is like, it's... Did I say cerebral for...
Yes.
Robert I meant it's the opposite of cerebral. It's all action, and you'll forget about it later.
Yep.
The Benedict Cumberbatch version, cerebral.
Yes.
Cerebral. Yep.
I think that's one of the big things for me why I like the show more is the emotions, and I think this might... Not just because the Guy Ritchie version is more... American-y and action-y, but I think because since one's a film and one's a show, obviously the show has far more time to kind of build up characters and emotions well, because in that death scene where Watson is talking to Sherlock's grave, and he's like, I don't want you to be dead, and he's like cry, and like Martin Freeman does that voice break thing so well.
Oh, it's like the best voice break in anything.
Yeah,
like,
I can't.
If you were to put together a list of like the best voice breaks in any movie, any TV series,
that
like,
one,
Martin Freeman, he'd be up there.
And even in other films he does it, it's just like, damn, son, why?
Yeah, he's good. He must have taken like a special class in just doing that. He's just like,
oh, don't be dead.
I want you not to be dead. Don't be dead.
What's that British accent? But that, I cried so hard. That was so sad. Whereas when Sherlock died in the films, it was still kind of like, oh yeah, sad moment, you know, like Jude Law's sad, but it wasn't like, oh no, it was just kind of like, I knew he would die, and then he comes back anyway, so it's fine.
That's right. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Sherlock Holmes and
his smarter brother.
Yeah. Shut up. Yeah, do you remember that movie? Do you remember much about the movie?
I only watched like 3 seconds of it.
It's like this old Gene Wilder movie, and it's so random, but like I used to love it so much.
Mum and our like uncles mention it a lot.
Yeah.
Whenever they're over, they're just like, oh, blah, 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 blah. They're quoting it. I don't know what they're talking about.
But it's actually, I loved it so much. I remember watching it. I remember like my nana and granddad were giving away their old videos and stuff, and one of them was Sherlock Holmes' smarter brother. And yes, Gene Wilder plays Sigerson Holmes, and it's like a classic. I loved it so much. But then I've watched it since, like maybe a few years ago, and it's so bad. It's so dated. But like,
I remember not really enjoying it the first time. Well, I watched it when I was like 10. But...
Yeah, but it's pretty terrible. Like you can barely watch it.
But yeah, that's just, I think it's old, you know.
But no, that's not the topic I wanted to talk about. The topic I wanted to talk about is the extended universe of sort of non-canon Sherlock Holmes.
Woo!
Yes, exactly. Is there an owl in here? No.
Oh no.
So yeah, I just wanted to talk about like there's been so many different books and stories and stuff that have been written in the Sherlock Holmes style, but not by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So a lot of big writers such as Neil Gaiman has written his own sort of entries into the Sherlock Holmes canon. So, for example, he wrote a short story called A Study in Emerald. Basically, it's this like Sherlock Holmes story that's narrated by a Watson type figure. You know, he never calls him Sherlock, but he just says, "Oh, my esteemed companion and my brilliant colleague," and stuff like that. Yeah, which is exactly what he did in the old stories. So in this version, it's like this alternative version of London where the Prime Minister and all of the leaders of government and stuff have all been taken over by these Lovecraftian monsters.
Oh, hell yeah. That's a Sherlock.
All these all these like big like spidery head sucky things that are just like perched on top of like the heads of the like senators and stuff.
Hell yeah. No, I like that one. That's Gaiman, isn't it?
Yeah, that's Neil Gaiman. Yeah. He also wrote my other favourite non-canon...
The bee one?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
No,
the bee one. Yeah, it's called the Case of Death and Honey. So it just kind of starts off and it's this like mysterious figure who's living in China on the side of this mountain, and there's this old beekeeper named Old Gao who's just kind of like harvesting honey from these bees, and there's this old sort of white guy who's just called like the Barbarian because he's just really tall and really like weird looking, and he just rocks up and he's just like making all these he's just learning all this stuff about bees and beekeeping, and then by the end of the story it's like seems to have nothing to do with Sherlock Holmes canon. They never even call him Sherlock Holmes, but then by the end of it you realise that he is Sherlock, and the reason why he's spent the last like 20 years or whatever trying to harvest honey from these bees is that he's trying to create some elixir of life so that he can, eat it and be young again. And then it kind of ends with just him sort of saying like, now I shall return to London, where I may dine with my old friend John Watson. Aww. And I believe I may put some of this honey on some toast for him in the morning or something like that. And
He'd
it's
be
just like,
pissed.
So
He'd be so pissed.
Watson's just finally about to die, and he's just like, God, thank God I can die now. And then
psych, immortal with me.
Yeah.
Be like, oh.
So it's just like, they get to go into the new millennium or whatever, just kind of like being young again and being back to their old like vital younger selves and like fighting crime for the rest of time. Exactly.
But he'd be pissed.
Yeah, he would be. But that I would love to see that being how the Benedict Cumberbatch show ends.
Yeah,
like I would love for like in like 50 years or something, when like Benedict Cumberbatch is like in his 80s or whatever, and he's just like all old, and they make some movie and they don't even say that it's a Sherlock movie. They just make some old movie called The Beekeeper. And it's just Benedict Cumberbatch as an old man, like living somewhere, and then like at the end, it's just turns out that it's a Sherlock movie, and it's like he goes and they have Martin Freeman comes in as a cameo at the end, and they become young again and go on to like fight crimes together.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That'd be so cool.
Moffat, Gatiss, better be listening.
Yep, make this happen. But anyway, so there's lots of other non-canon Sherlock Holmes stories. There's one called The Doctor's Case by Stephen King.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, which I would really like to read. I think that'd be pretty interesting. There's another story called The Adventure of the Laughing Jarvie, written by Stephen Fry.
Yes.
Yeah, so these are all basically the ones that I really want to read, that I want to find. The Neil Gaiman ones I have read, but the other ones sound really cool as well.
Yeah, Stephen Fry knows what's up. So he
Fry
played Mycroft in the films. So.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. So who better?
He was the weirdest part.
Yeah,
he was
the weirdest part of that movie.
He was naked for most of it.
Yeah, that's right.
Naked.
Fat naked Stephen Fry.
I loved it. It was my favourite part.
A fat naked Stephen Fry is still Stephen Fry.
Yeah,
you can't go wrong.
Beautiful.
Beautiful man. Love Stephen Fry.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you got another topic for us?
Yes, I do. I want to just talk about the impact that like Sherlock Holmes and all the stories and Arthur Conan Doyle's work has had on like modern day stuff.
Yeah.
Even like I don't think you could say like Sherlock. Even just the first name. Like, before, that was just a normal name. I think that was...
Was there anyone even named Sherlock before Sherlock Holmes? Was that actually a name?
Yeah, that was a real name. Because I've seen some other, like, people and characters and stuff called Sherlock.
Yeah.
Before Sherlock Holmes existed.
There's a Shylock in Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew.
Discount Sherlock. Whatever.
Shylock. He's like a slightly shy Sherlock. Shy Sherlock, yeah. Well, that's the thing, is even first name and last name completely removed from each other. I think Holmes, there's a number of things you could still think of, but especially in certain contexts, you'd be like, oh, Sherlock Holmes,
Yeah, especially if you used it as like a name or something. Yeah, it's who else is Holmes?
Yeah, H.H. Holmes, America's first serial killer, built his own murder house.
Oh yeah, I love serial killers so much. Not literally.
It's getting weird now.
Not literally.
I love them so much.
Oh, murder.
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 Arthur Conan Doyle would not be pleased with what
Arthur Conan Doyle.
But yeah, so I think in a lot of like books, TV shows, movies, any sort of literature, there's always, well, not every single one, obviously, but they do reference Sherlock Holmes quite a lot, especially at detective shows, because he was like the grandpappy.
The grandpappy. Yeah.
I mean, like, you can also look at Agatha Christie, obviously, as well. She was very big.
Yeah.
Poirot and Miss Marple.
Was I think Agatha Christie was writing in the 1930s, I think, wasn't she?
Was she a bit after?
She was a bit after because Conan Doyle died in 1930.
Oh, damn.
So
He would have been...
I think she would have, but, that was definitely following on from the Sherlock Holmes
but even then, I still
legacy.
Think, like, I mentioned Poirot a lot, because I love that man.
Yeah.
I love that man and his tiny moustache.
Yeah.
But no one knows what I'm talking about. One of my teddy, like, I have a bag that's a teddy bear, and his name's Hercule. And I carry around, and they're like, oh, what's his name? I'm like, oh, Hercule. And they're like, oh, okay.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you.
So no one really knows who that is.
Yeah.
I think if I said Miss Marple, they'd probably still... like
Yeah.
most people my age nowadays would be like, oh, that sounds familiar. Is it like a chef or something? But if you said Sherlock, they'd be like, oh yeah, the hat dude.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Like, he's so iconic. And it's so wonderful and amazing that this like really nerdy, intellectual, like sooth dude became so popular.
Exactly,
and
yeah.
Sort of like kickstarted the genre of like whodunits.
Yeah, and what's great is that his Arthur Conan Doyle's stories are still so accessible. Even like, there's a lot of racism and kind of misogyny. I don't know if you call it misogyny, but just kind of like ignoring the role of women in society, or like giving women a certain role in that period of society, where they're basically non-existent or just exist to be Watson's wife or something, or the cleaning lady.
Irene Adler, though.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. You do have the occasional.
It wasn't as bad as the racism in it.
Yeah, but even with all that stuff, his stories are just still so accessible and are still written for like mass audiences.
Yeah, but it's still like highly intelligent. Like you read it and you're like, oh damn, I would not like. I didn't see it coming, Conan.
I didn't see it coming.
Damn
it, Conan.
Why am I calling him by his like middle?
Yeah, his middle name.
Conan.
Conan
the Sherlockian.
What was that? You were in like a play that one time, and you were like,
God.
But like the line, I don't think did the line even make it in where you were just like,
no.
What was the line? It was like,
well, it was written. It was some stupid Sherlock like murder mystery on a plane. But
a train.
Why did I say plane? Sounds of
Snakes on a plane.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. It was on a train. It was like a cardboard set that we made in high school, and someone in our class wrote it, like 3 people, but I wasn't involved in it because I can't remember at the time. But they all wrote it out, and it was supposed to be like a comedy murder thing. We had like a Batman character in it who kept popping in, and I played Sherlock Holmes, like this like sexually ambiguous Sherlock Holmes. And I wanted this line to be in it when I first get introduced. I want to be like, my name's Holmes, James Sherlock. Yeah. And I told the girl who was like a frenemy, I was like, oh, I really want this to be my first line. And she was like, no. I never got to say.
It got vetoed immediately.
Yeah, I didn't get to say it. But I got to say some other stuff that I wanted, but like that was my favorite.
That's my favorite as well.
James Sherlock.
Anyone I ever tell that to just never laughs because they're just like,
yeah,
what? It just doesn't make any sense. But for some reason, to me, it's really funny.
I thought it was
and to you
good,
as well.
Yeah.
It's like, I think we're the only 2 people who would find that funny.
Yeah,
but
the
name's Holmes, James Sherlock.
Like, excuse me.
Excuse me.
It fit with the rest of like everything. That play was so stupid. It was horrible. That would have been the best bit.
That would have been the highlight.
Yeah.
But
yeah, see, even plays.
Yep, even plays
in
held
my
by
year, like 10, so I was like 16.
Yep.
Putting Sherlock in their weird train plays.
Sherlock's just going to turn up.
I died.
Wherever you go.
I died. He died.
Yeah, Sherlock died.
Yeah.
And that's the solution to the final problem.
Yeah.
Now, shall we have a quiz?
Yes.
Let's do it.
All right.
Sherlock quiz. Do you want me to start?
Yes, you start.
Okay. Question 1. Conan Doyle said he would have included 2 stories from his upcoming The Casebook of Sherlock Holmes in his top 12 list. Name one of them.
I don't remember any of the names. Oh, wait.
No, the ones that he said he would include.
Yeah. The Dancing Man, or was that one of the ones that he wanted? That he already had in there?
I can't tell you. I can't give you any clues.
Oh.
And no, that's wrong.
That's a clue then, isn't it? That's the only one I've read out of the ones that he said.
Jellyfish.
Oh! jellyfish. No, the lion's mane.
The case of the jellyfish.
Lion's mane.
The lion's mane. That's
Yeah.
it. Yes.
I forgot about that one.
I will give you 1 point for that. The lion's mane or the illustrious client. Either of those were the two from the case
He's
book.
got such weird names. I can't
Yeah.
remember them all.
But I will give you 1 extra point if you can name any of the 12 stories that actually made it into Conan Doyle's top 12 list.
Dancing Man.
The Dancing Man.
Oh, the Dancing Man?
I'm going to have to get the list back up because I didn't actually write it down. Let me see quickly.
Filthy Hagrid. I don't know.
So, The Dancing Man.
Yeah, I think that's what it was called.
I don't think he even wrote a story called The Dancing Man, so
It's
no.
something like that. I know that it had these, like, a page and it had these little stick figures on it that were actually a code. And I feel like it was called, like, The Dancing Man or something like that. Or, like...
Do you mean The Devil's Food?
No. How is it? Except for the fact that it's got the in it.
Oh, The Dancing Men. Oh, it is.
Well, thank you
It
very
is
much.
number 3. Oh my god, I just kept
You
looking right past
suck.
that one. The Dancing Men. Okay.
Hell
All
yeah.
right.
2 points.
You
then.
get 2 points. I mean, technically I gave you the answer for the jellyfish, but I will
Yeah,
give you
all
2 points so far
Yes.
out of a possible 2 from 1 question. All right, now your turn to ask me a question.
Okay. Number 1. What was Arthur Conan Doyle? Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Let's not forget the knight.
Yep, the knighthood, yep.
What was he originally going to name Watson? Was it Ormond Staker, Clifford Rudmond, or Omar Sharif?
Omar Sharif. What was the first one?
Ormond Stacker.
Ormond Stacker.
Yeah, or Clifford Rudmond.
Clifford Rudmond. Such like hearty British names. I'm gonna go with Ormond Stacker because that rings a bell, and I feel like
Ormond?
yeah, Ormond.
Correct.
Hey,
I made up Clifford Rudmond.
Clifford Rudmond.
And I made up Omar Sharif as well.
You did not make up Omar Sharif. Omar Sharif would be genuinely offended if he heard you say that. Does his work in Lawrence of Arabia mean nothing? I can't even remember if he was in Lawrence of Arabia. I don't know if he was.
If he wasn't.
Who is Omar
racist.
Sharif? Not racist.
You can't call anything racist. Alright.
Okay.
You go.
Question 2. The first recorded Holmes adaptation was A. So this is like a movie adaptation of a Sherlock Holmes, featuring Sherlock
Was it
Holmes.
Basil Rathbone?
No. A. Sherlock Holmes Baffled, a one-reel film running less than a minute, released in 1900 and was 30 seconds long.
I think you said minute.
What was that? No, one reel.
Oh.
Or B. The Valley of Fear, starring Harry Arthur Saintsbury, a veteran Holmes actor on stage, which came out in 1916.
I'm gonna go with 1916, the one, because I feel like that name, I feel like I've heard that name before.
Which, The Valley of Fear?
Yeah.
That is the name of one of Sherlock Holmes,
Then
Holmes
there
novel.
you go. I'm going with that because the last one sounded crap as well, so I'm going with that one.
That is incorrect.
Oh,
The real
sweaty
answer
hobo.
is Sherlock Holmes Baffled.
Say, oh,
Yeah, it was a one-reel
you
film.
people in 1900.
Yeah, apparently, it came out in
I'm glad
1900.
you're all dead.
Whoa. I mean, yeah, anyone who was born in 1900 would have to be 119, so
Oh,
they
actually,
could be
I think
around.
there's somewhat like a couple.
Yeah, I feel like, isn't the oldest person alive 114 or something?
Yeah, I think they're older than
I
that.
don't know. Maybe
they were
like
in, like,
120 or something.
120s,
Yeah.
Still, damn.
Damn. They could have gone to see it. They could have been in it. But
Probably
yeah,
not.
so apparently Sherlock Holmes Baffled was a one-reel
Wow.
thing that was released in some kind of like arcade or something, because when motion picture was first invented,
yeah.
it was just like little 30-second reels, and that was obviously one of the ones that they first thought
Yeah.
would get audiences interested in
Yeah.
Sherlock Holmes.
I would have if I was in there.
I would have, yeah, I would have been like, oh,
1900s.
Sherlock Holmes is
Oh,
the movie.
I
Oh,
say.
I've read the book and now I'm going to go see the movie.
This day of the 1900.
The 30-second movie. Yeah, apparently it was just 30 seconds long, black and white, uncredited actors, so no one knows who was even
Aw.
in it. But it was Sherlock Holmes and Watson. Basically, some guy appears and steals a bunch of stuff from Sherlock and then disappears at will.
How do you make anything with 30 seconds?
I don't know. And then apparently he keeps trying to solve it, and he keeps getting stumped somehow.
30 seconds.
I don't know how you get that much plot in 30 seconds. It sounds pretty interesting. Like, it sounds like it could have been a real story, but
Well, people who keep writing like 4-hour movies,
yep.
Batman vs Superman, need to take notes from that.
Avengers Endgame was over 3 hours, and it was the finest
Yeah,
motion
well, Lord of
picture
the
ever
Rings
created.
is also the bomb diggity.
Also had Robert Downey Jr. and Benedict Cumberbatch in it,
That's right.
both Sherlocks. And Basil Rathbone
No, you didn't.
as Thanos. Go on.
Basil Rathbone. No. Alright, my next one. So, what character was Cumberbatch playing that enticed Moffat and Gatiss that he would be the perfect Holmes?
Okay, so Benedict Cumberbatch was playing a role,
Yep.
and they saw him.
So Mark Gatiss and Moffat saw this and were like, you know what? That's what we want our Sherlock to be. So I have some character descriptions here, like just a vague thing of the personality.
Okay.
That is. So number A is a savvy businessman with a flair for the dramatic. B, a lonely widower whose auntie leaves him a mysterious cryptic message to her death.
Okay.
Or C, a child rapist chocolate salesman.
Are these all actual roles that he's played, or
No, 2 I made up.
Okay. I'm gonna say
Savvy businessman, lonely widower, child rapist.
I'm gonna say savvy businessman.
Savvy businessman?
Yeah.
That's wrong. That's my wrong noise. It was the child rapist.
Oh, okay.
I honestly don't know. I've watched this film. It was called... Can't remember.
Okay, good.
Damn it. I've wrote it down somewhere, but I've forgotten. Anyway.
It was a movie.
Yeah, it was a movie. It had Keira Knightley in it.
Okay.
And stuff. Anyway, the character comes into this small house, town full of his family, and he's just really creepy. He's got a little moustache and like a pinstripe little outfit, and he's a bit kind of cocky and stuff. So I think maybe that's where Moffat and stuff will lean towards, is like cockiness or whatever. But anyway, he raped a child and is really creepy.
Fair enough.
He like sells chocolate and he's just really creepy about it.
Yeah.
I don't know why that's what they thought, but anyway, there it is.
Well,
Boom, you got it wrong.
That's right. I got it wrong, so I don't have
one.
any.
No, you have
I
one.
got one.
You got Almond Sharif, right?
Almond,
You got
almond stacker.
right.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, well, I've got another one for you. Question 3. Which actor has never played a member of the Holmes family? So that could be Sherlock or Mycroft. A. Orson Welles, who was the director of Citizen Kane and was also starred in Citizen Kane. B. John Gielgud, who is possibly most famous nowadays for being Dudley Moore's butler in Arthur.
Great.
Or C. Alec Guinness, who was the original Obi-Wan Kenobi.
No, I don't think it was. I don't think it was Kenobes.
You don't think he played Sherlock?
I mean, I think he. No, I don't think Kenobes was it.
You don't think it was Kenobes?
No.
You are correct.
So...
Alec Guinness never played Mycroft, and nor did he play Sherlock Holmes. So, just for a little bit of backstory, Orson Welles played Sherlock in a radio adaptation of a Holmes play in 1938.
Ooh.
And incidentally, he later voiced Professor Moriarty in a radio adaptation of The Final Problem for BBC Radio in the 1950s.
Man, radio, man.
I know. Yeah, it means he could play Sherlock and Moriarty. And John Gielgud, who was the butler in Arthur, played Sherlock in that same series, the same 1950s radio series that Orson Welles played Moriarty in, while Gielgud's brother, Val Gielgud, played Mycroft. So, there you go.
Nice little bit of...
So, you got that one correct. So, you got 3 points out of a possible 4.
Hell yeah.
So, well done.
Alright, I think... No, that was all of mine for you.
Yep, okay, well, there we go.
What's that face? So, yep, you got 1 out of 3.
Well, not too happy with that, but I'll just live with it, I guess.
Anyway.
Yeah, anyway.
Anyway, I won, that's all that matters.
That's enough of that. Join us next week for our next episode, in which we're going to be talking about the crazy world of movie novelizations. You know, when you get a book and it says on the front cover, based on the movie,
film,
or the book of the film, as it will always say, the book of the film. Yes, that's what we're talking about, those kind of movies where they always have the photos in the middle, you know, a bunch of movie photos.
Little backstage clips and stuff.
Little backstage passes, and couldn't you just eat them alive?
Oh.
Anyway, we'll see you all then. For today, thanks for listening. This has been Joe.
And Sophie.
And we'll see you next time.